Mike, you've been intimately involved in many political campaigns and political races on the top level. George H.W. Bush probably being the most famous one. Have you ever seen anything happen like this?
No, I think we can safely say none of us has. And certainly in my 40 years of active political experience, there's never been anything like this. And I don't know there's ever been anything like this in the history of the United States. It's not the first time the Capitol has been breached with violence. You know, you've had the 1954 shootings by the Puerto Rican nationals, which injured 4 members of Congress. So I mean, it's not like it's the first time that Congress has been breached with violence, but it's certainly the first time that a demonstrating protest turned into a mob insurrection to shut down the workings of government.
Now, today we saw that President-elect Joe Biden came out and actually went on national television, gave a televised statement. But we haven't yet heard from President Trump, except for on Twitter, and that seemed to be after the fact. Is that politically a mistake for
No, he gave a televised.
Trump did, after that, right?
Yeah, no, Trump did give, but it is, you know, it does seem like too little, too late. I mean, to stay peaceful when they already haven't been peaceful is too much after the fact, and it certainly wasn't strong enough. And then even in the last televised statement where he said go home, which at least is giving clear instructions, which is what they're looking for, is clear direction from their leader. He still continues to pour fuel on the fire and say that this election was stolen and the election was rigged. And the thing is, it's hard for campaign professionals and press professionals like us to understand these people's point of view. But you have to understand that they really believe this election was stolen. All right. But you then have to go to them, well, why do they believe that? Why do they believe the election was stolen? And it's not because they've seen any evidence or any facts, because those facts and that evidence doesn't exist. They believe it because people they trust, like Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, have told them that it's true. And that's why they believe it. So, so the president has a responsibility, I think, at this point to stop pouring gasoline on the fire. And he has to stop saying that the election was rigged, because that's what pours the fuel on the fire. That's what gives these people the feeling that what they're doing is right.
Now you talk about the president has some responsibility here. He has famously said in the past that he could walk out on the street, shoot somebody, and wouldn't lose a single follower. Is there going to be backlash against?
Oh, I think he's wrong about that. I think he's going to lose a lot of followers out of this. I mean, I think he's going to be left with a fringe. I mean, there'll always be a fringe that never desert you. I mean, one of the things I always tell people is that when Richard Nixon resigned the presidency in 1974, he still had a 20% approval rating. There will always be a fringe of people who will never desert you because it's a tribal type situation. They're going to support their tribe no matter what. And I think that's an important point for us to consider today. Of all days, perhaps it's time we start considering how we do government in this divided two-party system. The founders, who we all revere, all warned vociferously against the influence of political parties. George Washington, the father of our country, told us not to have them. And like bad children, we didn't listen to our father.
Immediately.
So and maybe it's time. And I'm not naive enough to think that political parties are going to go away. I think they're a fact, and they're here to stay. But perhaps it's time, as Americans, that we reassess how we do government and start defining ourselves first as Americans before we define ourselves as Democrats or Republicans.
So let's. I have a couple questions here about that. If you were advising Vice President Pence right now, what would be your advice to him as far as his future in politics?
Well, I think that what he did today was exactly the right and correct thing. I mean, look, these people have a chance now to make a decision, and they're being forced to make that decision. Unfortunately, there shouldn't be this choice, but they do. Do you side with the Constitution or do you side with the president? And Mike Pence today stood with the Constitution. He made the right decision. Mitch McConnell today stood with the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, he made the right decision. And again, I understand I understand these people's point of view, that they honestly believe that this election was stolen from them. I get that. I get that they honestly in their heart believe that. But that doesn't mean you throw out the rule of law. I mean, I've been to many, many third world countries on different mission trips and whatever in my life. And when I've come back, the first thought that I have in my mind is, thank God I live in a country that believes in the rule of law. Because when you throw out the rule of law, you don't want to live in that country anymore. So even if you do believe in your heart of hearts that this election was stolen from you and your party, you can't now throw out the rule of law. That can't be the remedy.
Do you think a remedy is a third party at this point?
It's an interesting question. The founders actually had different ideas on that. George Washington believed we should have no parties. He believed in a no-party system. James Madison, in Federalist Paper number 10, argues that you'll never stop people from forming into factions, that's human nature. But his argument was, if you can't do that, never just have two. Because if you only have two, one has to have what he called the tyrannical majority. So his solution was to have many. But part of the problem is that over the years, many of the laws that have been passed have been done to ensure the monopoly of the two parties on the political party system. So, it might be time to start looking at some of those laws and at least breaking up that monopoly influence of the two party system. So I mean, one would certainly be gerrymandering, getting rid of gerrymandering. If you had more moderate districts, you'd have more moderate representatives. Just get rid of closed primaries. Why should 8 to 10% of the population have a say in who the two standard bearers are going to be for everybody else? And why should they only come from those two parties? So you're getting rid of closed primaries, getting rid of gerrymandering, and then workable initiative and referendum all over the country. If the elected officials won't put it on the ballot, the people can put it on the ballot themselves. So there's many things that we can do to make the system better, and make it work better, and make it more collegial.
So what should Congress do at this point, given what's gone on today?
You broke up there, Stone. Say that again.
Yeah. What should Congress do, given what's gone on today and the chaos at the Capitol? Should Congress?
Well, you'd like to think that after today, they'll reconvene, after order is restored, they'll reconvene and say, look, we can't pour any more fuel on this fire. We've got to stop these objections. We need to vote to accept the electors from the 50 states and close the process. You would like to think that would happen. You would like to think that Ted Cruz and his cronies at this point would at least take that track. Even now, I'm not convinced they will.
Okay. And I'll make you put on your future cap right now. What is this, just another example of things to come, or do you think our government heals from this and wakes up?
No, I'm more hopeful. I mean, I know several people today have said that this is the new norm, that because this wasn't thinkable yesterday and now it's a reality, that this is going to be the new norm and whatever. And I'm more hopeful in that. Our government rests on a very solid foundation, and it's called the Constitution. And a vast majority of Americans believe in the rule of law. You look at this mob that took over the Capitol today, and it looks like it's so many people. But you know what? It is this tiny little minority of the American people. This isn't what the American people are all about. The vast majority of Americans are moderates. They're not extremists. And even at that, I think that members of the entire political spectrum, Republicans, Democrats, independents, moderates, conservatives, liberals, are all going to rise up and condemn what happened today. Okay, so it's only going to be this tiny faction, I think, who are going to say, that what happened today was good.
Okay, so let me just play devil's advocate a little bit and have you respond to it. Yeah, small minority, but it did bleed into Congress. There were members of the House and members of the Senate both willing to advocate for powers that simply are not in the Constitution. So, I mean, what does it say about the fragility of our Constitution?
Well, look, they were using what is in their power legally to do to object. Okay. Again, Barbara Boxer did this in 2004, and it hardly raised a peep, to anybody. It's not. First of all, it's not unprecedented what they're doing. It might be unprecedented on the number of people, but they're using the power of their voice to raise an objection. Okay. Now, to my mind, it's stupid on two levels. Number one, it's dividing the Republican Party when they need to get unified, okay, and number two, it is telling people that the electoral process, the way it stands, is not reliable, okay, which casts doubts on their own elections. Okay, number one, why you have a right to sit in Congress then if all these elections are rigged, possibly, okay, but then, just when you think about it, when you take it to its eventual conclusion, you would say that, the vast majority of people would then say, okay, well, let's get rid of the Electoral College, okay? Now, what are the odds of the Republican winning the presidency on just the popular vote? Okay. Close to none. Okay, the last president to win the popular vote was George W. Bush in 2004, and before him, it was his father, George H.W. Bush, in 1988. So the Republicans don't have a great track record on winning the popular vote. So to me, this whole thing is stupid for the Republican Party to be doing this exercise, and with zero chance of success, But basically what they're saying is we want to speak up and give a voice to those people who honestly believe that this election was stolen. So, fine. The problem is that people warned that this had the potential to lead to violence. In fact, most people, they're almost sure that there would be violence today. The only thing is, I don't think they thought it was going to breach the halls of the Capitol. I think everybody kind of knew there was going to be some amount of violence on the streets of Washington. Yeah. I don't think they envisioned it moving indoors to the halls of government.
Right. So what does this say then about the future of the Republican Party? And President Trump's going to go away as president, but he's not going to go away politically. Has he lost enough power now that people are going to stop looking to him as the leader of the Republican Party?
Well, I think he's doing himself enough harm that he's losing more and more power every day and more influence every day. The thing is, he has to be very careful. I mean, he can issue himself a pardon, or he can have Mike Pence issue himself a pardon. But a lot of his followers and whatever, he's putting in a very, very dangerous position. The definition of sedition is the incitement to be unlawful, to stop the workings of government and the legal laws of that government. All right, just the incitement of it. So when you have your followers or whatever out there, saying these things that incite people, that could be defined as sedition. And that puts a lot of people in a lot of dangerous situations. So I think people need to be very, very careful here. And I think a lot of people will start distancing after the violence is caused today. I think you'll see a lot of people starting to distance themselves. Will there still be a base that never walks away from him? Sure. Absolutely. There were probably people who would have voted for Richard Nixon to be president again 20 years after Watergate. But that's that's neither here nor there. The Republican Party needed to rebrand themselves anyway. There's going to be a post-Donald Trump era, one way or the other, and they were going to have to rebrand themselves anyway. And if they're smart, they'll rebrand themselves as a more moderate party, because the Democratic Party, with the wins in Georgia, are probably going to move further to the left. One of the things I said this is not 2020 hindsight. I said this the Saturday after Election Day, when Biden was declared the victory. I said the best thing that can happen to Joe Biden is the Democrats lose those 2 seats in Georgia. Because if they win them, then they have no excuse not to give Bernie Sanders and AOC the more extreme things that they're going to want. And some of the things they want are vastly unpopular with the American people. College tuition for all, the things that are killers in the polls. And history is on the Republican Party side. Since 1952, all right, so Dwight Eisenhower, since a president gets elected and comes in with both houses of Congress. And 2 years later in the midterms, they lose control of Congress. It's happened every time except once, and that was right after 9/11. As the only, and it's happened every time since then. It happened to Obama, it happened to Reagan, it happened to Eisenhower. It's happened to them all. And you can see this happening with Biden because the more extreme wings of his party have demands, and he has no excuse not to give it to them now when you control both houses. So the Republicans will be in an ideal situation to come back in 2 years, but they have to rebrand themselves, and they need to rebrand themselves as a more moderate party. They have to get back to owning the middle.
Right, a lot to think about. Mike Dawidziak, thank you very much.
My pleasure. I'd like to say my pleasure, but on a day like today, it's hard to say that. It's a sad day for America, but I'm very, very optimistic that we're going to get past this. Order and calm will be restored. The lawbreakers will be prosecuted, and the vast majority of Americans are going to embrace the rule of law, which is the way it should be.